Hello, my name is Matthew Hermann Tague, and I'm the events coordinator for the Australian Apostolate Parousia. And Parousia has asked me to give this talk today for the Immortal Combat Men's Conference on the subject of Saint Benedict for the modern man. And the reason I've been asked to do this talk is that I'm an oblate of St. Benedict here in Australia, actually with the community of Benedictine nuns at Jamberoo Abbey in New South Wales. What is an oblate? I suppose we should start with. An oblate is a third order of a monastic order. So the first orders, of course, are bishop, priest, and deacon. Second orders are the consecrated religious, so that's nuns and brothers and hermits, etc. But the third orders are often open to the lay state and the married state. And I became an oblate or third order Benedictine just a couple of years ago, pretty soon after my return home to Holy Mother Church. I came home to the Catholic faith after 30 years being absent on the 21st of September 2015, and it's been quite the journey ever since. But pretty early on, I was very interested in learning more about the different spiritual practices of the church, because I really wanted to grow in my relationship with Jesus Christ and grow in my knowledge and relationship with his church as well. And I also had a lot of behaviors in my life that I wanted to conquer. You see, I am an alcoholic primarily. I have battled with all sorts of addictions, including sex addiction, drug addiction, masturbation and pornography, and even opiate use, legitimate opiate use. I am a pain sufferer. I have a crush fracture of T12-01 in the spine, so I'm in constant pain. And I can fall into all sorts of behaviors with regards to addiction. I can become way too obsessed with gaming. I can overindulge with food, all sorts of things, television. So I was really looking for some sort of order in my life, some sort of spiritual practice that would help me to seek the greater goods and use the lesser goods a bit less. You see, as an addict, my life was chaos and my life was all about the self. And the testimony that I have given here in Australia that has been turned into a CD by Parousia is called From Selfishness to Service. And this is because I used to live completely for the self. And in my new life as a Christian, and most particularly as a Catholic, my life needs to be one of selflessness. But I needed some help. So what was it that attracted me to the Benedictine spirituality? Well, firstly, the Benedictine spirituality is all about prayer and work, and offering that prayer and that work constantly up to God in union with our Benedictine community. Now, we third orders don't take vows, but we do make promises. The first promise is to try and live the Benedictine spirituality according to the rule of St. Benedict as best we can in our lay state. We also promise to try and pray the hours of Lauds, that's morning prayer, and Vespers, evening prayer, from the divine office every single day. We also promise to get into the habit of Lectio Divina. Now, as a pain sufferer, I was, when my wife and I moved to where we live now in Nowra, I initially found it very difficult to find work. And most of the employers down here were asking for medical information on the application forms. And so for a man with a back injury, I wasn't getting interviews. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I was now going to be the house husband. I was going to be the one looking after the children through this period of incredible pain and suffering. And when we first moved down here, I was still on the opiates. It wasn't actually until I became a Catholic that I tackled the opiate addiction and also tackled my first addiction, that of masturbation and pornography. And it was really in learning more about the Catholic teaching on redemptive suffering that allowed me to actually tackle these habits, these bad habits that had become ingrained, that had become such habitual sin that they were well and truly addictions. The Benedictine way of life, by putting order into my day and into my life and giving me sound ancient spiritual practices to follow, has been a massive help in conquering a lot of this stuff. Now, I'm not saying that I've completely conquered it. I am a work in progress. I claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. But I definitely want to recommend to anyone out there who is suffering and who is combating addiction. And let's face it, there's an area of all of our lives that we probably have a tendency towards sinfulness in. We like a little too much of a particular good. I have to tell you how much this Benedictine spirituality has helped me. Firstly, through praying the office, through praying morning prayer and evening prayer in particular. By praying the Psalms, I get a lot of spiritual enrichment. And I'm also learning to persevere in prayer. Quite often, the days when I need to pray most are the days that I really don't feel like praying. And again, I'm certainly not perfect in this area. There have been periods where I have dropped off my prayer, and it has been to my detriment. And I always find and have to keep reminding myself that when I turn back to those practices that I have promised, my life just improves, particularly if I really concentrate on making sure I do morning prayer as close to when I wake up as possible. The next spiritual practice, the ancient spiritual practice that St. Benedict gives in his rule, is that of Lectio Divina. And this is a way of reading scripture whereby God has a chance to talk to us. You see, Mass and the Divine Office are both types of liturgy. And these are the corporate prayers of the church and the highest form of prayer that we have. But the next on the list is this Lectio Divina. This is the next one down on the hierarchy of prayer. And it's a way of slowly reading scripture. And it's really good to use the scripture of the day as one's Lectio Divina. And what you do is you read the passage very slowly. And you may need to read it several times, and eventually a phrase or a word will jump out at you. And then we go into this period of contemplation where we talk a little bit to God and wonder about what this might mean to me in my life, and this phrase or this word, and what it might mean to me in this day. And then eventually just go into this very silent meditation. And I have found a lot of spiritual nourishment through doing this. So these higher forms of prayer. And then, of course, below that, and in complement to that, is the Rosary. And I have got a great deal from doing the Rosary as well. Another way of contemplating Scripture. Now, because we're talking about St. Benedict for the modern man, I also wanted to really zero in on two areas that we men always suffer with, okay? If you're a man, I guarantee you're going to suffer from these two things: anger and lust, okay? Following the practices, particularly for me, this is how it has worked for me, but following this practice of praying the office, praying the divine office, okay, the liturgy of the hours, particularly the morning and evening prayer, what I find is that it centers me. And it allows me to enter into a contemplative life. And this was what was attractive about the rule of St. Benedict, this idea of prayer and work being combined and constantly offered up to God. So if I do my divine office and I do my Lectio Divina, I find that I'm more capable of dealing with my anger. I've got a long way to go, but it's progress in the interior life that is helping me to deal with those spontaneous moments where I get angry and then react in a sinful way with that anger rather than reining it in. Now, the last one I want to talk about before I sign off is, of course, lust. So pornography and masturbation was my first addiction from about the age of 13. And since coming home to the Catholic Church in 2015 and learning more and more about Catholic teaching, I eventually had to come to terms with this addiction. This is another big one that I had to conquer. I'm also conquering food at the moment. I have discovered the joys of fasting and how beneficial it is to the spiritual life. And the fasting combined with these other spiritual practices is also helping me to beat the lust. But one big one for me was because my life was so sinful, because I have been so promiscuous in my life and I was only out for myself. Once I started to try and combat these desires, this false idea of love in the form of lust in myself, I found that the enemy had access to lots and lots of my experiences and lots of images with which to hound me. And there were two areas that I identified quickly as near occasions of sin. One was the shower. And so I had to pray before going to the shower, and I had to turn my thoughts to God in the shower, get what I need to do done, wash myself while thinking of God and not letting my mind wander, gaining control of my will. Now, the other one was when I was going to sleep. And for me, as a pain sufferer, for the last 10 years, of my, before coming home to the Catholic Church, I would often use masturbation at night as a pain relief to help me get to sleep. So I had this terrible ingrained habit where I would be thinking about sexual images as I went off to sleep. And so sure enough, when I start trying to turn my thoughts to other things, this is where the enemy comes in and starts throwing sexual images at me and all sorts of suggestions. And this was a real struggle, and I fell many, many times until eventually I realized that on my phone, I had an audio Bible. And I realized that it had a sleep timer. And then I thought, well, I can just put the sleep timer on for half an hour or 40 minutes and just have the Bible on in the background. Now, there's a couple of different apps where you can get an audio Bible, such as the Ignatius Study Bible app or the Truth and Life app. And if this is an area of your life, particularly at night, falling off to sleep, that you too get attacked, I highly recommend it because it has been life-saving to me. I find that when I'm getting off to sleep, if my thoughts do drift in those areas, if I do start seeing images, I can just concentrate on my hearing and concentrate back on the words of Scripture. And this helps to dispel all this crap that the enemy is trying to throw against me. So that's just a couple of practical ways that St. Benedict and the Benedictine Spirituality and the rule of St. Benedict has really helped me. I highly recommend that if you are doing battle with the enemy, check out the rule of St. Benedict. There is lots of wisdom in there that can be applied to any state in life. And I hope that what I've shared with you today can help. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or through Parousia. That's parousiamedia.com here in Australia. And Matthew Hermann Tague. Herman is the Benedictine that I attached to my Christian name when I became an Oblate, after Blessed Herman of Reichenau, also known as Blessed Herman the Cripple. So I'm the only Matthew-Herman with two N's, Tague on Facebook. So feel free to reach out, and good luck and God bless. Take on the battle.